What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Hernando Hot Rods. Today we're working on the Nova again. We're going to be running some brake lines. We're going to get everything traced with some MIG wire. I got a Wilwood master cylinder we're going to install. I also got to clean up the factory pedal box assembly and get that all mounted onto the firewall, and it also connects to the dash a little bit. So we're going to get after it, get these all ran, and hopefully get this thing with some functioning brakes, get it all plumbed up. So that's the goal. Let's get to it. Got my factory pedal, not the pivot point, but I have the factory pedal itself in the vise, and to get my pedal ratio correct, I need to move this up 1/4 of an inch. So to drill that hole, because of how little it's moving, I need to fill this one up with some weld, get that all ground down, and then we're gonna drill the hole just a hair above it. So right now this is a 13-inch pedal from this point to the top here. So if you took the 2 points, cut across, it's 13 inches, and this pedal is pretty much straight when it is in the car, just the way it was from factory, because you're like pushing down on it. But so from this point to this point is 2, which is, this is where the push rod comes off of with the little C bracket. So to get this to 2 inches instead of 2 1/4, we're gonna move the hole up, and that should give us a higher pedal ratio of 6.5, which with 100 pounds of foot pressure, that should give us around 700 PSI of overall hydraulic pressure to the calipers with a 7/8 bore master cylinder. All right, so I welded the backside of the pedal because it was not really, I couldn't see any visible welds. I don't know if this thing was just tack welded on. I don't know how they did it back in the 60s. Everything kind of looked like this, where it's just kind of barely welded. I don't even know if that is a weld or if it's just tacked on. So I laid some weld in there to fill the gap and keep it sturdy. I might go across this way too, just for safety reasons. And then as you saw, we welded that hole up. We got to drill that up higher after I grind that down. And then I think I'm gonna weld this top pivot point too, because it's looking a little scary. I don't know if that's a Friday at 5 weld or what they used back in the 60s, but I don't know. I don't even know if that is a weld. But we're gonna clean it up and then throw some more glue on it. Okay, so I finally got the pedal box assembly together. Got the new brake pedal pad on there, and then got new bushings on this. It's a post that rides through the top of the pedal. I had to grind down where my welds were earlier on the inside here, on the top half of the actual pedal itself, because that spring has to wrap around, and it almost seats all the way against the shaft of the pedal, so that it can, it has a little hook, so it can grab the hook, so now it recoils back. So I had to grind those down, obviously repaint that section after grinding it down, but we got the pedal box all together. So now we're gonna get this thing inside the car. Just want to show you guys what I'm doing. I just dropped the column, which has 2 bolts that come from the dash and the dash support. And now, if I can do this single-handedly, maybe not. All right, so then now the brake, the top part of the brake box is now going to sit on top of the column and underneath the dash, so it's going to get sandwiched between the two. So I gotta get these 2 9/16 bolts in, and then we can start messing with the firewall. So I've been screwing around with the brake lines out here. Got the master bolted up, looking crispy. And then I decided to start at a flex point because all this stuff is gonna be 100% stationary. So I'd rather find a point that the master needs to go to. So I have these little T-fittings that are from Amazon. I'll put the link in the description below, but it's just a stainless T that's machined with the ANs on each end, on the T ends, and then it has a little 1/4-inch hole tab also on the other side. So I just put a 1/4-inch rivet there. I have one end of the T going to the TBM caliper there, and then I'm gonna cut the other one across the cross member here. I've been messing around with some welding wire. I'm gonna do a little 45, come down. I'm just using the tape so the wire doesn't get all crazy. Yeah, so coming down this way, another 45, 45 back up. I'm gonna try and keep it on the top side of this post because I can't put it underneath because that's where we're gonna be jacking the thing up from. So we got another 45, it's gonna come here, and I'm gonna do a kick out this way, which I guess would be another 45. As you saw the other night, I had the MIG wire all set up here, so I traced all that. I forgot to record making this line, but I got 3 anchor points here. Instead of doing rivets, I wanted to make this removable, so I got a 1/4-inch button head, and I drilled and then installed nut certs into the chromoly tubing. And I had a rivet here originally. I had to lift this up because it was too low to the tubing to where I couldn't even spin a fitting on. So from there, I just made a little kick out so that, if you do a hard 90, there's not enough room for this to run its path, because you have to have a little bit extra length for the AN. So we have for the sleeve that goes inside the AN. So then we did a little kick out, ran that across the tubing. We got 45, another anchor point. I had some copper washers laying around, so I decided to do that instead of stainless, but kind of goes with the copper nickel copper, whatever you want to call it. And then that comes up here. Another anchor point, which might not have been needed, but for some reason this wanted to be lifted off the tube, so I wanted it to just sit nicely. And it kind of, you can see it kicks up gradually before going all the way up. So I just wanted it to not be rattling around, and this is super tight now. But I kicked this up, ran it across, and then I have another 45 to make up the height distance between this tube and this tube. And I took the Motion Raceworks little bulkhead piece here. We have 3/16 rivets there. I ended up heating this centerpiece here in a vise. I heated that steel up, and then I ended up hammering it down so it contours to the tube a little bit better. That way there's no crazy gap, or honestly it probably wouldn't even work if you had it just 90, unless you just did only one rivet, but that'd be kind of dumb because then it could still spin. So this is super tight. I mean, I could literally pull the car. Okay, so with most brake lines that you buy, they all come in a coil. You could buy straight sections, usually cost you way more to ship. That's what I did previously on this car, and I wasn't a fan of the straight section stainless, because then, man, once you get a kink in that thing, you cannot get it out unless you have one of those fancy tools, which I don't have. And I don't plan on buying. They're like $150 that you run up and down this cable to make it perfectly straight, which a lot of the time you don't even need anyway, because you put more bends in it. And then you can't, once you bend it, you can't put that tool on here. So you only get it straight once, which this is not straight. This is pretty close. I don't recommend doing this trick right here. unless you're using this stuff, because this stuff is super malleable. I mean, you could damn near make it straight from hand. You probably could actually, but I've been doing this with this stuff and it works pretty good. This is 3/16 brake line. All I did was take a piece of 2x4, put it in a vise, and drill a 3/16 hole. It needs to be slightly bigger, just to give you, because it's wood. If it wasn't wood, I guess it wouldn't have to be slightly bigger, but it's not very smooth when you drill a hole into wood. So I just made it very slightly bigger. I feed this through here. You run this thing back and forth a couple times and it straightens the coil out. Like I said though, if there's any imperfections, you could bend it all by hand. That's what's nice about this stuff. You only need, and honestly you don't even need a little bending tool because this stuff bends so nice by hand. I use it just to make things look make the bends look a little cleaner instead of almost lumpy. But yeah, you just run this guy through here a couple times. It ain't easy, but it's honest work. All right, so we got our first bend on the old MIG wire here. Now I set my second point. I have it marked with a little dot on the tubing with some Sharpie. And now we're gonna kick this back towards the frame rail here so that we can start heading towards that T-fitting. Okay, so we don't want this 90 to be parallel with the bottom 90 because we want it to almost, while kicking back in, we want it to go forward. So it'll technically be 45 degrees off from this plane. I don't know if the MIG wire has enough integrity to show it, but something like that. It'll be kicking back up. Okay, so after adding the large fitting onto the master cylinder, that almost becomes completely parallel to the outer side of the frame rail tubing, which we're trying to come back across of. So that tells me that we need to get this 90 coming out of the master right there as tight as possible and straight down, just to make it look that much cleaner. All right, so made my cut after measuring with the fitting on. That gives us the exact depth of where this flaring tool needs to be. And there goes my fitting across the floor, perfect. But I have this tool from Cobalt. It's the nicest, non-expensive tool that I've ever used for flaring brake lines. I don't know if I could find it on the internet, but if I can, I'll put a link in the description below. But this thing is a beast. I've used it on stainless steel fittings or lines, but wasn't a huge fan. But I think with some persuasion, you could probably get the job done with stainless. But this tool on copper, nickel, and regular steel lines is a dream. And the cool part about it is it has this little C channel in here, and then you also tighten it down so this thing isn't sliding around on you. And it just removes all the slop when you're trying to flare a fitting. And while you're clamping that down, it's tightening around the tubing and not making this thing a complete mess. And on top of that, let me get this thing lined up real quick. On top of that, this little handle up here, when you're flaring the tool, it almost like tells you when you're bottomed out. It'll just loosen like almost like a little torque wrench is gonna do that, but it pretty much tells you when you're when you hit a certain torque range per se, and it'll just loosen. So that's it. Because after it does that loosening thing, you maybe get like a slight turn and then it loosens again. But that means that flare is bottomed out, and you see the little wedge in there. So now I'll loosen this feller. Sometimes I file the end. I don't know. Look how damn clean that is. And also to mention, all the fittings and stuff I'm using is from Motion Raceworks. That includes the bulkhead that you've seen that goes from hardline to AN. That's the part number there. All right, so after much explanation, we got our 45 kicking it out to a 90 going straight up. And then we got our clean 90 going to the master cylinder. On the Nova, I'll show you in a second, it's part of the firewall is these big metal plates that mount the chassis up or mount the front clip on. And I gotta get past those / around those to start running brake line back and on the inside of the driver's side frame rail. So to solve such issue, rather than putting a piece of line around or going around or under or any sloppiness like that, we have a bulkhead. This is a 3/16 bulkhead, double AN. It comes with button head stainless bolts that are recessed into the front side. As you can see, the back side is longer. This is where your material that you're drilling through would sit. I gotta measure this hole. I don't know what it is. I'm gonna guess 5/16. Just throwing it out there. Got a school bus drive by. I'll let you know in a second what that hole size is, but this is what we're gonna get through that plate with. And this is a Motion Raceworks part. There's your part number. Got the bulkhead in. I ended up for the center hole using a 27/64 drill bit. Random, I know, but it's the biggest I had laying around and it just happened to work. And then these upper and lower holes are 3/16. So I drilled those two. Now we're gonna connect. We're gonna do the MIG wire thing again. And then we're gonna connect and trace from there to the master and make our line. Put you guys on time lapse. Let's go. So I was editing and realized I never recorded the rear brake line going back to the diff. So we have a -3 AN going to the back side of the bulkhead, coming down, making a 45. Coming down and across, got two P clamps going over the trans mount, I have a union, that way I didn't have one super long piece of brake line back here. Then coming over the drive shaft safety hoop, another P-clamp. I had to do a little S to go around the seat mount. Another P-clamp, anchoring it before the 45 gusset. Coming across, and then it's going over this cross member. And now we're cutting to the back. And we have two P-clamps. And then there's a better look at the bulkhead. And then the flex hose that's going to the diff. So right now I have these two bulkhead brackets that I need to weld. I'm gonna, instead of using rivets, which obviously I can't do on a diff, I'm gonna just rosette weld the two holes on the bulkhead brackets, get them stuck to the diff, and I'd already cleaned the surface of that, and I drilled out these holes a little bit, give me more space to lay some wire, and I cleaned the paint off the bottom of these. So I'm gonna get these tacked welded onto the rear end, and then we can start running some lines out to the calipers. All right, so got the tabs on. Look halfway decent. I was gonna do the rosettes in the center, but they weren't holding good enough, so I just did tacks along the edge on both sides. I didn't do the back or the front. So we got that sitting here, and then we're gonna have the flex coming out of the bottom where this red fitting is. Well, it's just a plastic cap, but that's gonna come up and it should S into there. All right, so another late night working on the old girl here. Just got done doing all the plumbing on the rear diff and getting all that connected. So now we're ready to bench bleed. I'm gonna show you what I've been doing this whole night pretty much. All right, so we have the tabs that I welded to the diff, and then we have this flex little S hose here, and then that's going over. I have a P clamp on the top of the diff, kinda, you can see it, it's on that top bolt there. And then I'm gonna come around here. This is what it looks from the back. Get the jack out of the way. Looks pretty clean. So it says to fill it halfway according to Wilwood. I'll go a little bit over. And then it says to just constantly push this in and out until you don't see air anymore, which but you can see the air going through the hoses. You pretty much have to get that air. This is gonna kill my hand. You pretty much have to get the air to the fluid, otherwise as you see, once you get halfway, if that fluid does not make it to the bubble, it just goes back into the system, into the master, which is all down here. So I guess I'm just gonna kill my hand for the next however long, and I'll speed this up so you guys don't have to watch me do this for like the next hour. So I just got the pedal all set up. I got the rod through the little C channel piece. It was easier to do this. I undid the master cylinder off the firewall. It was easier to put this piece on beforehand because there's not enough space between here and there without without backing out the master cylinder to give you enough room to thread this C channel piece on. And then you just put the post through, and then it has this little clip. This is all factory stuff. And then underneath, there's the rod coming out. Let's see if it'll focus. There we go. So I have the rod coming out of the firewall, and then it's coming across, and then there's just a jam nut to lock it in place. And remember, we had moved that hole where this pin is. You can kind of see where the grind marks are on the pedal, how it went up 1/4 of an inch. And just that much changes the whole pedal ratio, giving the 7/8 bore master cylinder more pressure. Late night working on the Nova. Just got done bleeding the brakes for the 3rd or 4th time. Just double checking, making sure there's no air in the system. The pedal seems pretty strong. Time to get this thing on the ground again and top off the fluid, and then maybe tomorrow roll it down the driveway and check to make sure they work. So I'm sitting in the car. I just moved the backstop. I got the brakes held down, and it should roll and stop. There we go, boys. We got brakes. What's up? I feel pretty sturdy. When you first get in it, I just had to pump it once to have a good pedal. So I don't know if that's an air problem or maybe it's just the way it is because it's manual, no power. So I have to look into that, maybe play with that later. But for right now, that's a W. As you saw, we got the brake lines ran, looking super clean. Got these 2 parallel lines that were giving me a little bit of anxiety. So I had my buddy at Spec 3D print me up a little bracket here that just gives them some rigidity in case they're bumped into, or God forbid something gets hung up here, or I don't know. But it just gives them some strength so they don't get bent or possibly even broken. But also adds to the cleanliness factor a little bit. So shout out to Spec 3D for printing me that. I'll put the link in the description below. And that's going to do it for this. We got them ran, bled, and working. So that's a W in my book. Please comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.